Hey everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do a book review of Witches Abroad, written by Terry Pratchett. This was first published in 1991. It is the 12th Discworld novel, and it is the third novel set within the Witches character subseries. So first of all, what is the Discworld? It is, as you might have guessed, a flat disc-shaped world where the oceans literally run off the edge of the world, which logically rests on the back of 4 very large elephants, which also logically stand on the back of a large world turtle, which swims through space as through it was water. Now, strange, yes, logical, debatable, but appropriate to the stories and everything else that Terry Pratchett is trying to say, very much so. So, first of all, I'll talk about the synopsis. It starts off with the death of a witch in the Ramtop Mountains. The Ramtop Mountains is essentially Terry Pratchett introducing Wales and little elements of Scotland into the Discworld and twisting them and turning them and being very sarcastic about them. She is a village witch, and she knows that she's about to die, because that is a sort of privilege that witches are allowed, that they are given a certain amount of time before they die to, sort of sort out their affairs, because they can predict death, so to speak. And upon her death, she leaves a note as well as a little package on her dining room table. And this package and note is given to one of the 3 witches in the character sub-series, Magrat Garlic. And the note, and indeed the package, is a little bit unusual because she leaves Magrat her magic wand. Magic wands are not a witch item. Witches do not need magic wands. However, fairy godmothers do need magic wands, and there are only ever 2 fairy godmothers at any one time. So she's passed on the mantle of being a fairy godmother to Magrat. And the note is basically telling Magrat what she needs to do. And that is, at least on the surface, a bit strange but relatively simple sounding. She has to go to a far off area called Genoa and stop rather than help a serving girl marrying the handsome prince, apparently. Opposite of what a fairy godmother in traditional fairy tales usually does, but Magrat doesn't mind that. She's quite up for the idea. However, she doesn't manage to go on this road trip alone, because she is joined by the 2 witches who are on either side of her in villages, and that is Granny Weatheraxe and Nanny Ogg, who are both phenomenal characters, described well, work well, and I'll talk about them more in a minute, but they're both brilliant characters. And the 3 of them basically go on a road trip across several stereotypical, almost European countries, go to Genoa, and there they have a rather interesting time trying to do as the old witch sort of bequeathed Magrat to do, and that is stop the young serving girl called Embers marry the prince, which is strange, but that's what the note says, so that's what they're going to try and do. Things don't exactly go according to plan, as you might have guessed, and basically madness ensues and all sorts of strange events happen, and I don't want to say too much more because it goes with spoilers, but the plot is just brilliantly well written, twists and turns and brilliant ideas. And if you think you can guess the plot due to fairy tales and myths and such, because obviously this book is very much, which I'll talk about momentarily, on the idea of fairy tales, just not quite as you imagine them, then you're going to be wrong, because this takes fairy tales that you think you know, and then it just twists them just a bit at a slightly strange angle, and then you can never quite predict what's going to happen. I mean, yes, if you know Terry Pratchett extremely well, then you can guess some of them, but often not really, and it's basically brilliant setup and overall a brilliant book. And part of the reason why the book is so brilliant is because of the three main characters, and indeed the other supporting characters. Now, Margaret Garlick, as the new fairy godmother, is a really interesting character. The other two characters, consider her the wet hen character. She's the sort of soft character who's kind to animals and tries to help people when they ask her, and sort of easy to push about. The other two really aren't like that, because Granny Weatherwax is all about being very strong-minded, knowing your own mind, knowing everybody else's mind, and essentially going through life just being who you are. You do not change who you are ever. You always are you. That's all you can be. And she goes through life knowing who she is, and people seem to understand that with her, and people are quite wary of her because she's a very, very good witch, one of the most powerful witches around actually, although she doesn't like to say that too much, apart from when she does. And the third character is Nanny Ogg. Nanny Ogg is sort of in between these two. She's not as really strong-minded as Granny Weatherwax, but she's not quite as soft and forgiving as Margaret, although Margaret certainly got steel in her and certainly got that fire in her when she needs to. She's not actually the sort of soft character that you imagine, which you'll learn if you read the book. And Nanny Ogg has got an adventurous youth behind her. She has a large amount of children. They all have children. So basically, she is the matriarch of the Ogg clan, which is a very large, well-known family within the Ramtops area, and frankly feared, because you don't mess with the Ogg family. Basically, if you start an argument with one Ogg, every other member of the Ogg family will basically turn their attention, rather than arguing with each other, which is their hobby. They'll stop arguing with each other and focus on you. And having all of them focus on you is not good, because whilst they are very argumentative and such, and they don't appear very sort of dangerous by themselves, you don't want a large amount of the Ogg family getting annoyed at you, because it's generally unfortunate. Especially with Nanny Ogg at the helm. She's a character that is very hard to forget and very hard to miss. And the three of them work together extremely well. I mean, all through the Witch's book, those are the three core characters, and they work together and bounce off each other in a really interesting and fun manner, because you've got the quite hard-minded Granny Weatherwax, you've got the sort of so-called soft Margaret character. For the record, Margaret was meant to be called Margaret, but the midwife couldn't spell, so she got called Margaret, in case you're curious. And then you've got Nanny Ogg, who is always sort of in between the two characters, and she's often trying to play peacemaker between the two, because they don't always see eye to eye, and they can argue and quite annoy each other. Well, all three of the characters can annoy each other actually, so there's quite a lot of argument on this road trip, which leads to some brilliant situations and really memorable scenes. And other things that make the memorable things in this novel is the location, basically the world building, because it starts off in the Ramtops, which is obviously, as I've said, essentially Wales with elements of Scotland and other sort of hilly countryside thrown in to stereotypical and usually rather humorous effect. Then they go on a road trip which goes through several very stereotypical or almost stereotypical countries. When I say almost stereotypical, because you think you know the idea of the countries that they go through. There is one country that I got a strange problem with this big castle on a hill, and all the people for some reason don't like showing their necks, and they are seem to don't like bats, for instance. I mean, vampires, obviously, and it's not quite what it appears to be. Pratchett takes the idea of this local castle on the hill with the evil vampire terrorising the villagers in some simple European village, and twists it, and basically he's very sarcastic about it, but in a very intelligent and smart manner that makes you almost believe that he's going to go the stereotype way, but then he doesn't, and you're like, oh, and then you laugh at what he's saying because it's just ridiculous the way he does it, but it works so well. And then after the road trip through these various stereotype locations, they get to the city of Genoa. Genoa is a fairy tale kingdom, and it is a fairy tale kingdom upon pain of death, because the person behind the scenes, which there obviously is a person behind the scenes that's sort of controlling the city, and you know that the three witches have to sort of basically beat or defeat as such. He's an interesting character. I'm not going to say too much about that character because it's a fairly significant spoiler if you know the name, for instance, even. So as to say, they're an interesting character, and they sort of control this fairy tale kingdom with an interesting view, because you must fit into the stereotype of a fairy tale kingdom if you live there. If you are a toy maker, for instance, you must whistle and tell the children stories, and if you don't, then basically you'll be killed probably. So, and there's other things like, for instance, if you are an innkeeper, then you have to fit the stereotype image of you have to be slightly overweight, you have to have a big red jolly face, and you have to be cheerful at all times. And if you're not, then yeah, you best learn quick. And the three environments, as I've said, this road trip in between the sort of the two rather interesting locations of the Ramtops and Genoa is basically brilliant. It contrasts and complements each other really well. There are some brilliant elements to it. Amazing world building is frankly phenomenal. I mean, for world building, this is actually one of the sort of standout novels to me in the earlier Discworld novels for world building, because he goes really enthusiastic on the areas and just has fun with stereotypes of Europe mostly. And one of the other things that he enjoys himself on is indeed one of the main elements that I've already mentioned, and that is the idea of fairy tales or myths and legends. Because obviously this whole novel, as you've probably got the impression by now, is based upon the idea of fairy tales need to come true, or at least that's what one particular person believes, and the witches do not hold to that idea. To them, especially Granny Weatherwax, you don't have to fit a type. You don't conform to a stereotype. You are independent. You are yourself, and you always can be yourself no matter what. It's the most important part of being an individual and about being a person alive on the Discord today. So she doesn't do well with the character behind the scenes who's trying to set up this fairy tale kingdom, and the contrast between the characters, and then also how these fairy tales and myths are brought into play, where they are done in a very sarcastic way, but as I said before, you're never quite sure what to expect, because Pratchett, he doesn't just sort of take a fairy tale, for instance, and then just twist it around 180 degrees and look at it from the opposite direction. He just twists it slightly and takes a slightly odd look and takes parts that you think you know because of stereotypes and such. Some of them he does indeed use as stereotypes, but others he twists and gives a sort of irrelevant look at. And this just creates a brilliant environment and some really brilliant ideas, because you never can be sure entirely which fairy tale or myth Pratchett is talking about always. Some of them you actually think, oh yes, he's talking about this fairy tale, and then he'll slightly twist it and he's like, oh, and then it makes obvious sense that he's actually talking about another fairy tale after it's done. So this strange combination of amazing characters and locations with the fairy tales is frankly fantastic, and something that I personally love. The other major idea or theme of this book that ties into both the independent side and the fairy tales is the idea of destiny. The individual behind the scenes of Genoa, who want things to run by a stereotype, they are very keen on destiny, and ensuring that things happen according to a sort of preordained plan, which is basically what destiny is. The witches don't agree with this. They think that you should live your life the way you want, which, yes, does indeed play into obviously the independent sort of individual part, but also the idea that destiny is something that is fixed. Destiny is not fixed for the witches, and obviously it's not fixed for any individual person. You can have a idea of what you might want to do, and yes, people in real life, I mean, everybody has a certain thing that people often expect you to be, expect you to do in life, but that doesn't mean you have to do them, because that's just an expectation. You can always break expectations, change expectations, and change your life, and indeed be independent the way you want to be. Don't just follow along just because it seems convenient. And it talks about this in a really interesting manner and ties in with all the other events. And in some way I would say that this is a really amazingly well written novel with great characters, a great plot, amazing world building. As I said, it's actually one of the best world building in my mind in the earlier Discworld novels, and it's just a really fun, enjoyable novel which I would highly recommend. I wouldn't say I would recommend if you haven't read at least one of the other two witches novels. First, because the characters of the three witches in particular I think are slightly useful if you've read, for instance, Weird Sisters, which is the second and major book before this, which I would suggest you read, because you'll know the characters more and you'll understand the concept and what Pratchett is trying to say, because it's very much based around the three witches. But overall though, you can read this without a major knowledge of any other Discworld book actually, which I mean, most Discworld books are relatively independent. You know, they help with a few other novels being read first, but not major. And with that said, I will leave this review here. So if you read Witches Award, or you would like to, then please leave a comment. If you've read any other Discworld book and you want to talk about them, then feel free. I will be reviewing, as I've already been doing over the last few months, every other Discworld novel in order over the upcoming period of time. Obviously it depends I don't know how long it will take me to review them all. And that said, that is it for this video. All my social media links can be found in the description box below, as always. And that said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.